Besides safety, we also want to look at trustworthiness. Are you or your agency staff and administration trustworthy? Well, can you maximize trustworthiness? Well, one of the ways is to be very clear about the tasks, to be consistent, and to have professional, interpersonal boundaries. How can services be modified so that tasks and boundaries are appropriate? Sometimes you have to sit in a meeting and ask these kinds of questions if you're in an agency and see what people say. How can the program be modified to maximize honesty and transparency? Can you be transparent? Does your agency allow you to be open with your clients who come in? It's easier if you have your own office to do it, but in today's work, we're having fewer and fewer ability to have our own offices. Some questions you might want to ask as you think about this. Is it clear who does what, when, why, and how? Are the professional boundaries clear? No touching of consumers or staff without permission. Of course, you can touch with permission. No sexual harassment or discrimination. I say that thinking, is it still necessary to say? But I'm afraid it is. How are multiple roles for staff handled? Do staff get together as a team? We try in our graduate training program to teach our students that kind of teamwork. What are the expectations for staff by the administration? Are they consistent for everyone? How are they measured? And what happens if somebody does not meet expectations? Is there a way to upgrade their skills or remediate them? How is informed consent obtained? We often forget that we need to do that. Are goals clearly negotiated between you and the client? And can consumers give partial consent, not 100% consent? Is information about the program realistic? Are we really telling them what we're giving? Are we transparent? And are the risks and the benefits explained if there are such things? Think about those things. They can make our clients feel that they are able to trust us more. For battered women, it's really important to allow them to have choices. The kinds of choices that they need to make, sometimes it's difficult for them. But that's part of our intervention, is to really teach them to take back their power. We call it re-empowerment. But part of re-empowerment is making choices. So we want to maximize their ability to make a choice. But staff have to have choices as well. If you work in a place where staff are not given choices, it's going to be much more difficult for you to be able to teach the client that choice is okay. So we want to know, how much choice does the client have over what kind of treatment they get? Can they choose their own therapist? Can they choose the gender of the therapist? Can they choose whether to go into a group or into individual therapy? Can they choose what time they come, where they go, where they're seen, what kind of services they have, group or individual? All these are choices. Maybe they can't have them, but they should at least be discussed so that the client knows that you know that it would be nice if they were able to have that choice. But at this point, for whatever reasons, we just can't give it to them yet. How much choice does the staff have in an agency? Do you have choices? Or are you being told exactly what you should do, when you should do it? Does the program build in even small choices? Like, if I need to call you, how should I do that? What time of day? Do you have office hours like pediatricians do, calling hours early in the morning? How much say does the consumer have over the times we start and stop services? Are we the ones who tell them when services are going to be over, or can they choose it? Obviously, the day-by-day services, we have to have them within a time frame. But how do they know when they're making enough progress to terminate? Are services a privilege, a right, a responsibility? Questions to think about. What are the consequences for not following the rules? Are they arbitrary? Are they punitive? Somebody doesn't come in 2 times and they're discharged? Or if they have good excuses, are they allowed to continue? Do supervisors communicate their knowledge of the choices that staff and consumers need to make? Do you have a supervisor that doesn't tell you you've done wrong until you've done it? Nobody likes that. So these are some of the kinds of things that we want you to think about choices. Remember, we're looking at culture shift, or the possibility of culture shift to a trauma-informed culture. And we also want to look at power and control. Remember, domestic violence is about the absence of power and control, or somebody taking away the woman's power and control. Do we share our power with our clients? This is an important part of feminist therapy, is to look at the power needs of a therapist versus the client. How does the program activities foster collaboration and share power between the administration and the staff and the consumer? It all passes down when you work in an agency. Do providers respect clients' life histories? Are consumers seen as the ultimate expert on their experience? Remember, we may have the knowledge, more knowledge about mental health and psychology issues than do our clients, but they have more knowledge about who they are and their histories, and they'll only share it with us if we share back and forth. We want to make sure that their needs and their preferences have a sufficient amount of weight in what kind of treatment goals and the timing that we use. I often think that timing is everything in treatment. So we need to pay attention to what the client's telling us rather than working on a manualized type of program where we just barrel ahead and not give the client the right to say how they feel about it. Do providers identify tasks that we can work on collaboratively with our client? These are the kinds of things that we need to think about. Sometimes we often have to think about how we say things to our client. For example, we may want to make an interpretation about something that we've been working on, but we want to give the client the opportunity to be able to say yes or no if she believes in that interpretation, rather than say this is the way it is without any kind of feedback. The last area that we want to talk about in providing trauma-informed culture is empowerment. Important area, because for most women, even without domestic violence, we do not feel empowered in all of our life. And for domestic violence victims, their power has been taken away from them. So we want to prioritize empowerment activities and skill building, both for our clients and for the staff. Are consumer advocates for ending gender-biased violence in the planning process? Are we really planning to make some changes? Well, if you don't have the advocates, the strong advocates in your planning process, the probability is it's not going to overcome the ennui of tradition. Are consumers' staff strengths assessed as well as areas for needing improvement? I suggest our treatment should be strength-based rather than problem-based, because Battered women have been told so often that they're what they do that's bad. All their faults are just named all the time by the abuser. So it's time that we start rebuilding and empowering our clients by talking about their strengths, how they manage to survive situations that maybe you and I couldn't survive. Does the consumer feel validated at each contact? Does this not mean that we have to tell her that she's right all the time? But we have to listen to her, and we have to let her know that what she's describing certainly would be a lot to have to go through. And finally, do supervisors adopt a positive, affirming attitude when they supervise staff? If you're a supervisor, think about that. Are you also positive enough with your staff? We spend so much time looking at the negative that we need to really look at some of the positive if we want to do a culture shift to a place where victims feel comfortable enough to go over the impact, the psychological impact of the victimization on their lives. Otherwise, they won't do it. Now, sometimes they'll go further. Not only will they deal with issues, but they also want to deal specifically with the trauma that has happened to them. So if you're wanting to provide trauma-specific services, the first thing you have to do is get yourself good education. Sometimes continuing education can do it. Sometimes you have to go back and take a course on trauma. We've got great courses here, and a lot of them online.